Look, Trump won this election, by which I mean he won the Electoral College, which, for reasons I will never understand no matter how many times it's explained to me, is how things are done. And many people...
Let's be honest. There are a lot of quirks to our American republic, a lot of rules and structures that aren't necessarily intuitive to a modern-day American. But there is one system in particular that always seems to confuse and anger people on both sides of the aisle: the Electoral College. And this shouldn't come as too much of a shock. This is the system that picks winners and losers. It decides who is going to be the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, a position that has only grown in significance over the centuries. It's only natural that should your candidate lose, you might feel the poor old Electoral College is to blame. Now, that's not to say there aren't any just criticisms of the Electoral College. There are. Many, in fact, but it is often misunderstood. First, here's how the Electoral College works today. Each state gets a number of electors equal to the amount of representation they have in Congress. If a state has 3 members of the House plus its 2 senators, that state gets 5 electors. With the rise of political parties, the individual autonomy of the electors has diminished greatly. Electors are now expected and often bound by faithless elector laws to cast their vote for the chosen candidate of whichever party won their state. And typically, states have an all-or-nothing system, where the candidate who receives the majority of votes in their state receives the entirety of electoral votes of that state. Once a candidate reaches the magic number of 270, they officially become president-elect. If no candidate reaches 270, the decision falls to the House of Representatives. Now, before we get to the problems of the Electoral College, let's look at why it was created in the first place. After the founders had to scrap the toothless Articles of Confederation, they were faced with a new challenge: creating a form of government powerful enough to be effective, but still too weak to devolve into the monarchy they were genuinely terrified of, and rightfully so. It was clear there was a need for a centralized executive branch, but this led to many new questions. How many executives would there be? What powers would they have? How long would they serve for? And most relevant to this video, how would they be chosen? Initially, it was proposed that Congress would choose the president, but that idea was scrapped because it gave Congress too much power over the president. Then one of the delegates suggested that the people decide who the president would be. But as Elbridge Gerry noted, how would the people even know who they're voting for? We're talking about an era in which most Americans didn't travel more than 5 miles from their birthplace, and where the most efficient form of communication was a kid traveling on horseback carrying a rolled up piece of newspaper. The people just didn't have access to information to make an informed decision about the president. And that's where the Electoral College comes in. It solves both of these problems by creating a system that exists for the sole purpose of choosing the president, and by allowing people to pick representatives they trust who can choose the president on their behalf. But just because this was a masterful solution at the time does not necessarily mean that it's right for us today. Perhaps the best example of electoral malfunction is the 2016 election. There is something eerily undemocratic about a candidate receiving 2 million less votes than his opponent and yet still emerging victorious. There is also the existence of swing states created by the Electoral College. States that are not in play receive far less attention than places like Ohio or Florida. Instead of the candidates focusing on the entire country, as they should, they focus their efforts on specific regions where the vote counts most. Both of these issues seem to detract from the idea of representation central to our government. Now let's just assume for a moment that you are someone who thinks the Electoral College is broken. Is it possible to change it?
Amending the Constitution is very hard. You need to define a constitutional problem, one, a constitutional solution that fits the constitutional problem but doesn't have a lot of unintended consequences. That's 2. And 3, you need the political resources and political will to get through the process. We have 27 amendments to the Constitution. Mine. 27 amendments out of 40,000 proposed since 1789.
How many?
40,000.
40,000.
0.5% chance that an amendment proposed will get adopted.
But even if we could easily change the Electoral College, that doesn't mean we should. In fact, Democrats should be terrified of it. 270 to win looked at 5 possible alternatives to the Electoral College, and in each instance, Trump still emerged victorious. And to go back to 2012, there were actually 2 alternatives that resulted in a Romney victory. Part of this has to do with Democratic strongholds like New York and California. Under the current system, Democrats receive all of the votes from these states, regardless of what percentage of the popular vote they received. If we shifted to a proportional system, Republicans would receive substantial amount of electoral votes from states previously untouchable. But Republicans who tend to value the role of states over the federal government have reason to be happy with the Electoral College too. Even just from an optical perspective, shifting to a pure popular vote would remove the focus from individual states entirely. And the Electoral College does give extra weight to smaller states. A vote in California is technically worth less than a vote from Wyoming. If you're someone who values states and fears the biggest states overriding the wills of the smallest, that is a good thing. Here's the bottom line. The Electoral College isn't perfect, but it isn't broken either. Yes, it has its flaws. It shifts undue focus to certain states, and in rare instances, it defies the will of the majority. But as a whole, the Electoral College has reflected the will of the people while at the same time keeping the focus on the individuality of states. And given the political capital that would be required to amend the college and the existence of much more pressing issues, perhaps we should accept the Electoral College, not as a perfect system, but as an enduring hallmark of the American experiment. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. As always, let me know what you thought in the comments below. You can also check out these videos over here because they got that new fancy end screen that I'm maybe editing into this. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway guys, I gotta go finish editing. I hope you have an awesome weekend. Until next time, let's make YouTube great again.